Now, the explosive growth of green bonds in the capital markets is increasingly attracting attention from investors. $10.5 trillion is actually needed over the next 20 years to transit to cleaner, low-carbon economy. That money could come from the financial industry due to the sale of climate bonds. Now, climate bonds is a means of financing a climate action solution. Climate bonds are used to finance or refinance projects needed to address climate change. They range from wind farms and solar and hydropower plants to rail transport and building seawalls in cities threatened by rising sea levels. Only a small portion of these bonds have actually been labeled as green or climate bonds by their issuers. Joseph Owolabi is the West Africa lead in charge of climate change and sustainability services at Ernst & Young. It joins me now on the program to take a look at these issues. Good morning, Joseph, for your time.
Thank you.
Well, we say climate bonds. People are wondering, what is this all about? We hear all kinds of bonds. We have federal government bonds, state government bonds, and now climate bonds.
So climate bonds are just bonds that are devoted to address climate action. And when we say climate action, we're looking at environmental degradation and other impacts that have been encompassed on the environment because of issues done by humans or other people in the atmosphere.
Okay, how much of this have been explored in Nigeria?
Okay, Nigeria, it's pretty much new, but I'll give you a context from a global perspective. You rightly mentioned that over the next 20, 30 years, we'll need over $10.5 trillion to move to low-carbon emissions and other projects. Of this, Africa requires about 20 to 30 billion investment over the next 20 years. That comes to about $0.6 billion. Clearly, government in Africa cannot fund this, especially with the recent currency volatility in Nigeria, in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and other parts of Africa. Experts expect 90% of this huge, close to $1 trillion to be funded by private sector. Green bonds present an excellent opportunity for this to happen. There are various interventions. You have bilateral and multilateral agencies devoting funds to address climate action, but an innovation in this area is the green bonds, or what you call climate bonds.
How aware are we about this? Because it's one thing for you to know the benefit of a particular bond, and how much of it do we know? Does our government understand in terms of how this can help to address climate change challenges?
Okay, the whole concept of green bonds is pretty new. It came into existence sometime in 2007, so clearly it's just about 10 years. Okay, in 2007, the first green bond that was released was by the European Investment Bank with support from the World Bank. In 2013, there was a significant leap for leap bonds. We had a record $11 billion was raised. In that same year, the IFC, which is an arm of the World Bank, listed its own green bonds. And within 1 hour, $1 billion was raised. So in 1 hour, the whole issuance was consummated. So you see that attention has been gathering and momentum also catching pace across the world. In Africa, obviously, it takes time for this kind of innovations to get to the market. But in 2010, the Africa Development Bank issued its first green bond, about $500 million. That was also fully subscribed. So one of the advantages of green bond is because it speaks to the art of environmental protection. You find that it attracts different kinds of investors. So your traditional investors plus other investors that have a heart for the environment, that want to preserve the planet, they also come in and you're able to diversify your investor base. In Nigeria, there are a lot of talks by the Nigerian Stock Exchange, the Ministry of Environment, to also see how they can start issuing this bond from 2017.
Just before then, let me take you back to 2013 November, where the first corporate bond, the green bond, was actually issued. That pushed up the market size to $11 billion. That's massive.
Yeah.
Now, did any country in Africa actually take advantage of that bond issuance? How many countries actually benefited from it?
Oh, so a number of countries, Morocco, South Africa. South Africa has issued its own bond, about $700 million. Zimbabwe. In Morocco, they have the bond was devoted to address some of the issues you mentioned in the other show, which is solar farms. So you have solar farm projects, transport rail across Africa, and this is happening at a significant and phenomenal rate. It's good to understand the rates at which this trajectory has occurred. So in Africa, 2010 was a start date. Less than 6 years from now, The first issuance was $500 million. Currently, we have over $2.5 billion that have been raised just in Africa alone. This is still small compared to the global over $300 billion that have been raised from climate action. So Africa is still lagging behind. And when we consider the developmental needs, the infrastructure deficiency that we had and deficit that we have across the continent, this presents an excellent opportunity for private sector. So if you're a bank, you can list, if you're corporate, you can have corporate bonds. The government can also list green bonds. They could issue green bonds. So you could have the Ministry of Finance, municipal bonds. They're very common in this day and age.
We talk about banks participating in green bond issuance and also state governments at whatever level, whether state or federal. And when we consider our level of illiquidity, do we have the funds? Does it look attractive for us at this time to say we want to buy those bonds for the environment? Do you think it's something we would want to embrace at this time? Definitely.
The challenges are there, and some of the challenges are awareness, like you mentioned. People are still not aware of what green bond is. They don't understand the risk profiling of green bonds. And, compared to the typical bond, what are the differences? And it's clear. There's not so much difference between a green bond and a typical bond. The difference is, unlike the regular bond, a green bond is devoted to a green action. So you're either considering addressing some of climate issues we have in Ogoni. You want to look at power. Power is an issue in Nigeria. We're currently below 3,000 megawatts. If you want to address that, you're looking at gas turbines, solar. If you devote funds to address this issue, they are called green bonds. Usually they are about AAA ratings. So these are choice investments. They are not, high risk investment that you typically have. And the opportunities are very, very immense for companies to take advantage of.
Is there any guarantee? Does the government guarantee, anyone guarantees this kind of bonds? Okay,
so there are international standards. We have, one of them is the Global Green Bond Initiative. I also have the Climate Bond Principles that presents due diligence and quality issues that needs to be addressed. We have things like pre-issuance. Before you issue those bonds, we need to check that you have the projects that you want to use it for outlined. When you issue the bonds, there needs to be continuous monitoring to ensure that we don't have what we call greenwashing. So you say you're going to use it for green bond, but you divert the funds to other uses.
So the Nigerian Stock Exchange, the Ministry of Environment, are they sitting together at this time to look at the modalities for the issuance of these bonds?
Yes.
Are they putting anything into considerations right now, how it will impact the capital market, quoted companies, or those who are interested in it?
Yes, like I mentioned, there's a focus group already in Nigeria looking at these issues, the modalities, the framework for issuance in Nigeria. But you also need to note that a lot of this will obviously come from foreign investors and what you call supranational bodies. Also our pension funds, there are huge funds there. Looking at where those funds will go, a number of those funds will come from there. Even though Africa has suffered a significant decline in our fortune the last year, 2015, you still discover from our recent research, EY attractiveness study, we discovered that Africa is still the destination of choice for foreign direct investment.
Despite the slowing growth?
Despite that, Africa recorded a 7% increase in foreign direct investment. No other region in the world recorded that. The other region that had a positive increase in foreign direct investment was Europe, outside of Western Europe, where they had a 4%. So even with the issues, terrorism, volatility in currency, the investors are still looking out for investments where they can put their funds. And you have a new set of investors who have social and environmental responsibilities for their stakeholders. These investors are looking for green bonds across the continent where they can devote their funds.
And with our interest rate as high as 14%, central bank, so this would be a good peak for foreign investors who would want to come into the economy.
Definitely. And also local investors, like I mentioned, the pension funds, asset managers in Nigeria, across the region, will be looking at this kind of investment because it helps them diversify their asset portfolio.
Joseph Owolabi, lead climate change sustainability services at Ernst & Young. Thank you so much for your time on the show.
Thank you.